I was the star of Dr. Worley's Adventure Club, a children's show that doesn't exist. Out of all the fundamental questions we have about life and the progress science has made over the course of time, I find it astonishing how little we know about our own brains. Neurobiology is a fascinating field of research, but even with all the progress we have made, some questions remain unanswered. Why do we dream? Are we ever really conscious? Are we in control over our own minds? I'm in no way an expert when it comes to these questions, but during my psychology studies, I did try to educate myself more to fulfill this deep need I've always had for exploring the unknown. Something I learned and found particularly interesting is the way in which everything in our brains and bodies is somehow connected. Our senses, our memories, our emotions, they work together in remarkable ways. If you've ever walked down the street and smelled the scent of someone who used to be in your life, you know what I'm talking about. The bittersweet nostalgia. While the olfactory system seems to be especially strong in activating emotion, the other senses are quite powerful as well. It happens to me a lot with music. Turn on a song from 2009 and I'm transported right back to that sweet teenage melancholy. Except with the sound I heard the other day. The memories weren't sweet. They were buried so deep within me that all they did was leave a feeling of shock and terror which no matter how hard I tried, I simply couldn't make sense of. Dun dun doo doo. Done. It was the jingle the show would start with. I was sitting in my car, driving down to my mother's place when I heard it. It belonged to some regional fast food restaurant. Nothing too special, but it wasn't the ad that made me worry. It was the jingle they used. This short melody is what woke up the blurry memories somewhere in the back of my mind. As I heard this typical early 2000s tune, I drove down to the next gas station to park. Suddenly I couldn't focus on the street anymore. My breathing got heavy as if there was a big stone in my chest. Something had just been activated inside of my mind. Something I had entirely forgotten about for the past decade. Dr. Worley's Adventure Club. Dr. Worley always had a big bright smile on his face, even when he talked in a more serious tone. His voice was shrill and jolly but deep and rough at the same time. A sound that suddenly made its way back to my ears. Wonderful afternoon, adventurers and explorers, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Are you as excited we are for another episode of Worley's Adventure Club? That's what followed the jingle. I saw Dr. Worley standing in the middle. He had long fuzzy hair and would wear peculiar suits and the weirdest color combinations. Next to him were children. I closed my eyes and tried to remember their faces or even their names, but it was too long ago. I laughed out loud. As I started to calm down more, I couldn't believe how I had just blocked this memory out of my mind. When I was 10 or 11, all I wanted to be was an actor. I was a passionate kid, and when I wanted something I would do absolutely anything to get it. I'm not sure how exactly it happened. I think I saw an ad somewhere about a new show casting young actors, and while I don't remember the casting process, I knew that I was part of the show. It must have ended when I was 13 or something, because that's when Mom and I moved away for her new job. I started my engine again and drove to my mom right away. I suddenly had so many questions. My mother wasn't home yet, so I decided to do some online research first, but the thing is, I can't find anything about it. Even now. The show wasn't too big and maybe even something more regional if I remember correctly, but I assumed I'd at least find something on YouTube. For a moment I even doubted if it really happened. As I said, the memories were blurry and it could have been that I dreamt about it or something. If I'd been the star of a show, I wouldn't have simply forgotten about it. I would have told my friends or something. This was just so weird, but if it wasn't true, then who the hell was Dr. Worley? And why could I suddenly get that jingle out of my head? Dun dun doo doo dun. Alex, I heard my mother say in a panicked tone. I hadn't even heard her come inside. I turned around to see a look of surprise and fear on her face. Hey Mom, I told you I was coming over yesterday. Remember? I laughed. Oh yes, of course honey. She smiled and walked over to give me a hug. Then her eyes went over to the laptop. Worley, she mumbled, and her expression darkened. Yes, Mom, I need to ask you. It's so strange, but was I part of some strange children's show? I felt foolish even asking this question. My mother walked straight to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine. She offered me one, but I shook my head. I haven't thought about this in years, she laughed, but I could swear I saw her eye twitch as she said those words. You know honey, I was very busy back then with work and you were alone a lot. I felt guilty, and you seemed to enjoy acting so much and those other kids really liked you. So it was real. I interrupted her. My mom nodded and took a big gulp from her glass. You were really young when it started. When your contract expired. You were already becoming a teenager, and I think you started regretting it. Kids change a lot at that age, you know. You thought it was childish and even made me destroy all the tapes. She walked back to the living room and I couldn't help but feel like she was hiding something. Okay Mom. Sorry, but this is super weird. How the hell did I completely forget about those years? My mom looked at me with a concerned look on her face. Why was the show canceled? I asked. You don't remember? I shook my head. Listen, Alex, you are almost 25 now. You've had a nice and normal life, and that is all I ever wanted. Sometimes there's a good reason we don't remember particular times in our lives. Sometimes it's better to keep things buried. Mom, you're freaking me out, I exclaimed. She sighed. I wasn't the best mother back then. I spent far too little time with you. And I regret it deeply. But it's also the reason why I didn't see your show much. You'd be picked up by your agent and I was happy about that. I tried watching the tapes they gave me then, but I couldn't make much sense of it, you know. It was true. My mom didn't have much time for me when I was younger. I mainly got raised by babysitters and myself, but that was a long time ago. It couldn't be the only reason my mom was acting so strangely. Okay mom. I honestly don't care. I don't even remember it. Just why did it get cancelled? I asked, slightly annoyed. She made a long pause but finally answered. The show was really popular for a while, but then strange things started happening. Children would disappear and leave notes saying they were going on an adventure. You know, kids disappear all the time. It's not something we like to talk about, but apparently the notes were all strangely similar. And then there were the suicides. She had finished her glass of wine and went back to the kitchen to refill. Suicides? What are you talking about? My heart started racing. Kids like to copycat. Maybe they heard about other children doing it in the news somehow, or I don't know. Look, this was a long time ago. Obviously it had nothing to do with the show, but people always need to blame someone when things go to shit, right? So it got cancelled, and it was honestly for the best anyway. You grown too old for that stuff. What? How are you taking this so casually? I started shouting. My mom shot me an angry look. Did you just come to visit me so you can ask questions and shout at me? She hissed. I looked at the ground. I guess maybe these memories reminded her of a time where our relationship wasn't the best, but I don't think she understood how stressful it was for me to suddenly remember something so odd about my past. I needed more information, but I knew I wouldn't get them from my mom. I had lost contact with the friends I had as a child, so that wasn't an option either. I texted some of my middle school and high school friends, but nobody seems to ever have heard of a show with some Dr. Worley. I hardly slept that night, as I was lying in my old bedroom, having that annoying jingle stuck in my head. More memories started coming back to me. Memories of Dr. Worley's laugh and the stick he always had with him with a purple and yellow swirl. It looked like a big candy cane. The rest of us all wore one specific color each. During every episode we had the same outfit. There was a boy in green, a girl in yellow, another girl in blue, and I was purple. I had the visuals and the sounds, but not the content. I have absolutely no idea what those adventures were that we went on. And the weirdest part is that all the memories I did have were about the show. None were about the moments of us filming them. It made sense that I thought I had made it up. I would still be doubting it if my mom hadn't just confessed that it was real. My eyes shot wide open and I couldn't help but grin as I got an idea. I got out of bed and slowly opened my door so I wouldn't wake my mom, sleeping next door. I tiptoed towards the stairs that went to the attic and climbed up. My mom was the kind of person who never threw anything away, which made it even weirder that she hadn't kept any of the tapes, but I remember distinctly that she had kept many boxes with old toys and other stuff from when I was a kid. When I moved out for college, we brought some more of my things up here and I saw many boxes from our old home. After rummaging through old stuff for what must have been hours, I finally sighed and gave up. I couldn't believe that there was not a single piece of evidence from this strange time of my life. Disappointed, I went back to my room so I could try and get at least a little sleep. I took a look at my phone and finally, the hope was back. I had gotten a text from Helen. I had texted her earlier, asking if she remembered the show. She lived next door and went to middle school with me. This is so strange. I just thought about this the other day. I meant to text you but had been so busy with work. How are you doing, Alex? She had sent this a few minutes ago. Helen works as a nurse now, so I guess she was on her way to work. Helen, so glad to hear from you. Sorry, I know this is super weird. We definitely need to catch up soon. But can you tell me what you remember about the show? Like any tiny detail would already help. She replied a few minutes later. I don't know anything about the show. Your mom would never let us watch it, remember? And it wasn't on TV here. I remember how we once video chatted with one of your friends from the show. Must have still been MSN times, haha. That was all the information Helen had, but it was all the clues I needed. Turns out, I could still access my MSN Messenger contacts. One of the perks of keeping the same Hotmail account for years, I guess. And funny enough, there were a couple of people whose names I didn't remember. I sent each of them an email, trying not to sound too much like I was going crazy. But maybe there was a chance that one of them was actually one of my actor friends. It took a couple of days, but 2 people responded. The first one was someone called Janie, or at least that's what it said in the address, but the email wasn't exactly helpful. All it said was, "Don't ever ducking contact me again." I kept staring at the screen, wondering whether the real issue with the show wasn't what happened on screen but behind it. It was a scary, ducked up thought, but maybe there was something that Dr. Worley did. Something that made me want to forget. It would also explain why my mother acted so weird when the topic came up. I wondered whether she made up the thing about children disappearing and the suicides to distract me from something traumatic. My stomach started to turn on the thought of that. I almost decided to let it go. I started thinking that Mom was right and that sometimes it might be better to not bring up memories we tried to forget. But then I got another email. Wow. Didn't think I'd ever hear from you again. I have the tape but not online. I can send it to you. The boy in green. The tape. As in one. I hesitated at first. I know sending your address to a stranger isn't very smart, so I gave him the address of a parcel station where I could pick it up as well as my phone number. I asked some more questions but the only reply I got was this one. It wasn't our fault. Alex, don't listen to what I say. 2 days later I finally received the tape. When Mom was at work, I got the old VHS player from the attic. My hands were shaking as I put the tape in. Done done. Wonderful afternoon adventurers and explorers, and welcome. Are you as excited we are for another episode of Worley's Adventure Club? His voice sounded even more distorted than I remembered. May I introduce to you our main explorer, Alex? I saw a 10-year-old version of myself jump into the screen. I had a big smile on my face and waved furiously. And these are my buddies Lee, Janie and Millie. Child me said. The other kids appeared behind me. What's today's adventure? They shouted in unison. The energy was definitely a little too high but nothing too strange for some old kid show. Nothing too worrying at least. Except after that moment everything we said sounded somehow like gibberish. I wondered if that was part of the concept, but it did feel very weird. I kept listening to the nonsense but at the same time grabbed my phone. I wanted to send Lee, the boy in green, another email. Are you happy? I heard my own voice say. I looked back to television and was surprised to see the camera zoomed into my face. Something about it looked somehow off. Not just the gigantic smile I had, but something about my facial structures was odd. I decided that it was probably just too much stage makeup as the other kids looked a bit weird as well. All of a sudden the smile disappeared and young Alex looked a lot more serious. You know she still doesn't love you, right? She never had and never will. I felt like I had missed some important part, but none of the things said before had made any sense. It didn't even sound like English. The young version of me started laughing. The camera zoomed away again and now the other kids were in the picture again. Lee, Millie, and Janie were standing in the back, all laughing. In front of them I saw someone lying on the ground. It looked like another kid but dressed in regular clothes. It was difficult to recognize what gruesome things were going on back there until the camera moved closer. The eyes of the young boy were opened wide. He wasn't moving. The big candy cane was shoved inside his stomach, staining his clothes red. I held my breath. This couldn't be real. This was supposed to be a kid's show. Obviously there was no way they could ever screen something like this, and at first I wondered if Lee had sent me this as a prank. Maybe it was some macabre off-screen joke. The boy I came closer again and started speaking directly towards the camera. Remember how much fun we had? Alex, let's do it again. And that's where the tape ended. I noticed I was still holding my breath. This had to be a prank. Why else would I be talking directly to myself? Still, for some reason I couldn't bring myself to rewatch the tape. I don't know how long I was just sitting there, trying to remember anything useful. When my phone started ringing, it was an unknown number. Did you watch it? I heard a male voice speak. Lee, I asked. He was quiet for a while. It was a joke, right? I mean we were young and stuff, but damn. That was ducked up. I added and laughed nervously. I hadn't seen the tape for years. I didn't remember any of what was happening in it. But I don't think it was a joke, he finally said. What the duck? It had to be. I even said my name directly to the camera. I responded. What are you talking about? Alex, you didn't say anything in that video. It was just me talking. And I told myself to duck and die. This time I stayed silent. Maybe Lee was screwing with me, but why would he do that? We haven't spoken to each other in over 10 years. I have to go now. Don't show this video to anyone else. Wait, Lee, I said, but he had already hung up. It probably goes without saying, but I felt fairly agitated after the call with Lee. Instead of getting answers, I was left with even more questions. It didn't help either that my mum acted even stranger around me and seemed to be avoiding me at all cost. I decided to go for a run so I could try to empty my head a little. But on my way out I was stopped by Helen. I'd seen her a couple of times when visiting my mum in the past years, but besides the occasional small talk or birthday wishes, we hadn't been in contact much. I guess that's what happens when you grow older. Life happens and you lose touch with your childhood friends. I wonder if that's what happened to me and my actor colleagues as well, or whether there was more to it. After seeing that tape last night and talking to Lee, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Alex, Helen walked over and gave me a big hug. Can't believe you've been here for days without saying hi, she said as we sat down at the porch to catch up. Sorry, I meant to, but I got a little distracted, I said. It felt strange that only a few days had passed since I sat in the car where that strange jingle activated something buried inside of me. I felt like I had just woken up from a dream just to realize I had entered a nightmare. No worries. I'd been pretty busy too, but as of today I'm officially on summer break, she exclaimed and raised her arms in the air. Summer break? I thought you were working already, I asked. I went back to school to study medicine. Oh, wow, we really needed to catch up, I laughed. That's awesome. Yeah, it's great. Anyway, how are you? Did you find out about that show you did as a kid? There it was. The knot in my stomach tightened again. Helen was pretty much my best friend growing up. She even remembered talking to one of my friends from the show when we were younger. I took a deep breath and proceeded to tell her everything that had happened in the last days. All the weird memories that came back to me which I couldn't explain. The weird conversation with my mom. The tape. And the phone call with Lee. I kept speaking without even taking a break and she sat and listened to all of it. I know how insane this sounds. I still think that the tape was just some weird prank from Lee. Helen stayed quiet for a while. But that doesn't explain your mom being weird about it. She finally said. I mean, maybe she feels guilty or something. I don't know. But I don't know. Maybe I'm going crazy but my gut tells me there's so much more to it. If I could only remember. I did find it a little strange that you forgot about it. It wasn't that long ago and it's not really something you just forget about, you know. I nodded. But what troubles me the most is that phone call you had with him. You haven't talked to this guy in years and suddenly he tells you that some young version of him told him he should die. Whatever happened or whatever is going on. It sounds like he might need help. Did you try to contact him again? She asked. I bit my lip. I hadn't called him again. I basically threw my phone in the corner after the call and tried to forget about it. Of course I couldn't. I shook my head. I should have, it's just. After seeing the tape I couldn't really think straight. Can I see it? Helen asked. I was probably even more nervous showing her that tape than when I watched it myself, but she listened to everything I said and she seemed to be understanding. She didn't make me feel guilty or crazy or anything. I was glad that I opened up to her. Helen sat down on the sofa as I inserted the tape back in the player. My hands started trembling. I wasn't ready to watch the madness again, so I turned my face towards her instead of the television. Dun dun do do dun. Wonderful afternoon adventurers and explorers and welcome. Are you as excited we are for another episode of Worley's Adventure Club? Yikes. Dr. Worley looks more like Dr. Molesty. Helen joked. I stayed silent as I observed her reactions. Ah, look at that. What a cutie. You didn't tell me you were the leader of the group. Oh, and that's Lee. Right. The one in green, yeah. I said without turning to the screen. Yeah, he was cool. A bit edgy, she laughed. But I guess we all were in 2009. Okay, now I don't get it anymore. What age group was this made for? She asked and raised an eyebrow. There it was. She must be seeing the ducked up murder scene. I thought. For some reason she stayed weirdly calm. I finally turned my gaze to the television but I didn't recognize what was going on. It didn't look like the scene I had seen yesterday. The four of us had a treasure map and were exploring something. The imagery reminded me of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. There was no blood and no dead child lying on the floor, but it had to be the same tape I saw yesterday, so I had gone back to the moment where I started. It looks like some scavenger hunt, but what the hell is that language? Helen asked. It was the same gibberish I had heard when I watched the tape. Wait, hand me the remote. She rewound the tape back to the starting moment. The moment where Dr. Worley introduces us. She got close to the screen and took a photo of my face. Then she went forward to the scavenger hunt and did the same thing again. What the duck? Helen mumbled. That doesn't look like your face. It doesn't look like a face at all. Did they make you wear masks? She handed over the phone and I scrolled back and forth. She was right. It was the same thing that I had noticed yesterday. My face looks strange, but this wasn't just makeup. The proportions were slightly off, as if someone had plastered a second face on top of mine. But only in the later frames. We checked again, and it was the same for the other faces. Maybe, I muttered. I honestly don't remember anything about the filming part. It would be strange to leave the introduction normal but change your looks for the rest. Or maybe the intro was something they always played. Are there any more episodes? I don't know. Lee only sent me this. I answered. This is really disturbing. She whispered we should try to call him. It took about 6 times, but finally Lee picked up. I wasn't really sure what to say, but Helen took control pretty quickly. After reminiscing about old times for a while, Lee seemed a lot more relaxed, and I'm not sure how else to describe this. He seemed normal. I was still a bit skeptical, but hearing them talk about regular life helped ease my nerves a little. Finally she got to the point. So Alex, and I watched the tape. Are there different videos? Cause he saw something else than I did. No. It's one tape. One video. There is just this one episode. I probably shouldn't have sent it, but it's been creeping me the duck out. I constantly have nightmares. And he stayed quiet for a while. I haven't talked to anyone about this except my therapist. I wanted to destroy the tape, but then I got that mail from Alex. I'd almost forgotten about you, man. Yeah, me too, I said. I hadn't said anything since we started the call, even though we had the speaker on. You shouldn't have shown it to her though. I warned you about that. It's okay. I didn't find it that scary at all. It was cute. Helen chimed in. So, this might be a little weird, but why don't we meet up? We're old enough now to drive, she then suggested. Lee stayed quiet for a while. Yeah, duck it. Why not? But could you come here? I can't really leave, I'm taking care of my grandpa. It all happened really fast, but there we were. driving to the town where I was born. The place I had almost forgotten. There were a lot more trees surrounding the town than I remembered. We passed the sign to Fairway. I remembered how Mom always talked about visiting the town sometime, but we never actually did. Martin. That's kind of a nasty name, Helen said as we passed another sign to a town. It's actually pretty nice. We went there a couple of times to go to the farmer's market. Well, the few times Mom was around. Helen gave me a sympathetic smile as we drove through more trees. And finally, there it was. The big sign saying welcome to Wadden. A vivid but grey town somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I don't know what I was expecting. Some part of me kept thinking this was all some ducked up trap, and we would be walking right into the arms of Dr. Worley himself. Instead, a slightly older version of the green boy from the video opened the door. With a shy smile on his face. "You're not blonde anymore," he said towards me. From closer up I noticed the massive bags under his eyes. His voice had gotten deeper, but I guess so had mine. "Nope. Grown out of that, I guess." I hesitated for a moment before going in for an awkward hug. "And nice to finally meet you in real life. Helen, is this your first time in Wadden?" She nodded. "Yeah, it's nice," she said with a friendly smile. "No need to be polite. It's a garbage town. The only reason I still live here is my grandpa." Lee laughed and welcomed us inside. "I've been here before," I mumbled as we walked inside the house. Lee's parents had passed away when he was very young. His grandparents were the ones who raised him, but apparently his grandmother recently died as well. "Oh yeah. You came here sometimes after the show when your mom would work. You remember that?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not really, but we have some photos." "I actually don't remember a lot from back then." "Yeah, sounds familiar. Have you been in contact with any of the other actors from that show?" "The girls," Helen chimed in. "I chatted with Janie a few times. Around the time I talked to you guys as well. I got my phone and sent him the response I'd gotten from her the other day." He nodded knowingly. "Yeah, that's pretty much what my last interaction with her looked like." Lee got us some cups and coffee as we sat around his kitchen table. It didn't take long for us to feel comfortable with each other, and the longer we talked, the more memories of my past came back. But still nothing about filming the show. "You know, I was actually a little nervous when you sent me that mail. Thought it was some sort of trap." "Sounds ridiculous, right?" Lee said while he poured coffee in our cups. "Trap?" Helen raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "Don't know. Dr. Worley." Lee laughed nervously. "Or the producers of the show, or some crazy fan maybe. Although that's not plausible as the show doesn't even exist." "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" "We have the tape right here," Helen responded and pointed towards her backpack. "Yeah, I mean there is this one video. That's it though. They aired the same shit every day for like a year." "Wait a second." He left the room and we heard him go upstairs. "Do you think we can trust him?" I whispered towards Helen, to which she only shrugged. "Okay, this is everything I've collected so far. I know it looks a little obsessive, but well, it's been a rough couple of days." Lee was back with a pile of papers, photos, and notes. "That tape you saw is the only thing we ever filmed. Except, I don't think everyone that watches it sees the same thing. And well, you guys kinda proved that theory." Helen saw some scavenger hunt. "Yeah, that's what it looked like to my grandpa too. But this show was ducking popular with other children. I remember people in school telling me for years how obsessed they were with it. Then why did it get cancelled?" I asked to see whether Lee's theory would confirm the things my mother hinted at. Because something strange seemed to happen to some kids who watched it. They'd disappear. Some apparently started killing their pets and some killed themselves. I finished his sentence. "That's what it looked like." "I don't know. This is so ducked up," Helen mumbled. "We went through some of the articles and it was true. There was a series of seriously messed up events taking place. For a while nobody realized that it was connected to Dr. Worley's Adventure Club, but then more and more parents found notes from their children saying they were going to explore a new world or similar stuff. The show was cancelled shortly after that." "What is this?" Helen asked as she held up a photo. A photo of the four of us with Dr. Worley taken in the studio. Except, Millie's face was blackened out. On top of our heads someone had written "murderer" in red letters with an arrow pointing towards me and Lee. Lee didn't say anything for a little while. It seemed as if he was carefully collecting his words. "Janie sent this to me," he finally said. "That photo. It woke something up inside of me. Not a visual memory, but a feeling. A terrible feeling." Suddenly the jingle made its way back to my mind, but this time the sound was followed by a cry. My hands started shaking and I started sweating nervously. "Lee, is Millie dead?" He looked me straight in the eyes, with a look that matched mine. "I don't know," he whispered. "I can't find any information about her. Sorry, Lee, but this is getting really strange." Helen quickly got up from her seat. Her expression, a mix out of fear and disgust. "I'm not buying this. You forgot about being part of some murder show and happened to remember it at the same time as Alex." I felt terrible seeing Helen so freaked out, and for bringing her here at all. We never even thought about Lee being dangerous, but what he said next made me understand everything better, even if it didn't necessarily help with the fear. I know how eerie this sounds. I'm going ducking insane myself, and hadn't Alex reached out, I don't know that after seeing that tape, Man, I was so messed up. He took a deep breath. The memories didn't come out of nowhere. I heard that damn intro song. The weird melody. Dun dun do do dun, I mumbled. Where did you hear it? I added in a louder voice. I heard it on the radio. Well, my grandpa and I did. He's got dementia and doesn't remember much about anything, but when that spot came on, he suddenly whispered Dr. Worley and smiled at me. I had forgotten all about it for so many years, but after searching through our basement I found that tape. Helen and I shot each other a look. The spot. Was it for a burger place? I asked. Not sure if it was burgers, but I think it was called Larry's Wine and Dine or something. I got up from my chair. Adrenaline was rushing through my body. I don't think that radio spot was a coincidence. Lee. Not if I heard it in a whole different state. I think Dr. Worley is trying to reach out to us. Our subconscious is something truly remarkable. Just think about all those skills that we can now perform without being consciously aware. Driving a car, speaking, reading, all without any effort at all. Our autopilot just does it. But at the same time, the idea of having all this information inside of us frightens me. Just imagining how much knowledge is hidden somewhere in our mind. All the things we can't control or can't even access. It makes you wonder who is really in charge of yourself. I'm not sure whether something inside of me was trying to protect me by forgetting the past or better blurring it, or whether there was more to it. I mean, there had to be more to it, considering I wasn't the only person being affected by Dr. Worley's adventure club. We had already come too far to just give up. Helen and Lee agreed. We needed to figure out what had happened all those years ago and whether it was now somehow repeating itself. Because right now, it felt as if Dr. Worley was planning a comeback of some sort. We had dinner with Mr. Grass, Lee's grandpa. He didn't seem to know who I was, but as soon as I saw him, I started remembering the afternoons I would spend here with Lee and his grandparents. I even believed that Janie and Millie were here from time to time. I didn't ask Mr. Grass about it, however. Lee said it's better not to ask him about things from the past as it agitates him sometimes. So we had a nice dinner and played some card games, after which Mr. Grass went to bed. It was already pretty late at that point and Lee invited us to stay. I was reluctant at first, but we had come all the way and Helen thought it was a great idea. I guess the mistrust she had towards Lee started vanishing the more tired she got. Helen was now lying on the sofa snoring loudly, while Lee and I quietly went through some more of the clues he had collected. You know, it's alright if you go to sleep too. Looks like you haven't done that in days, I said. Lee just shrugged. No, a hole here. I'm okay. Every time I try to close my eyes, all I see is the ducking video. I took a deep breath. I understood what he meant. It was the same for me. The empty eyes of that child being impaled by the candy cone were burned inside my mind. What exactly did you see, Lee? I asked. Before answering, Lee got up and got 2 beers from the kitchen. He offered me one, but I declined. After taking a big sip, he finally answered. There was the intro. Then some stuff that didn't make much sense. We were speaking and singing in some strange language with voices I didn't recognize at all. It honestly sounded alien. Yeah, I saw something like that. And we were dancing in circles or some shit. I added. You know what the weirdest part is? Those words don't make sense at first, but I think there's some logic behind it. As in, there's a repetition of things we say and it all sounds kinda similar. Do you think they taught this to us? Cause at first I thought it was just random bullshit, but maybe they put those words somewhere in a script. I hadn't even thought about that. To me it just sounded like gibberish. Anyway, after the already weird scenes it got really messed up. He started whispering, I think I killed someone. I mean, I don't remember, but there was this scene and Dr. Worley gave me something and a candy cane. I interrupted him. Lee shook his head. No. It was a plastic bag. Then he whispered something in your ear. You went to get some kid. A little girl, and then I put the bag over her head. My breathing was getting heavier. We both saw children being murdered. Or at least that's how it appeared. Was the girl Millie? Is that why Janie sent you that picture? No. I'm not sure what Janie meant by that. I'm thinking maybe she saw something else on the tape. Maybe we did hurt Millie. I don't know. I don't know anything. Lee was fighting with tears. I understand what this looked like and how he was feeling, but I simply couldn't accept that we supposedly killed any children. I mean, we were children ourselves, for God's sake. I put a hand on his shoulder and tried to comfort him a little, even if I didn't exactly believe the things I was saying either. It was a show though, right? I mean, maybe we just remember it wrong. Maybe it wasn't made for kids. Maybe it was some horror stuff and we were just too young to understand. No, Lee interrupted me. Because, after that scene, the camera got really close to my face. The morphed face, and it said that it was my fault that my parents died and that I should follow them. He took another sip from his beer. They died in a car crash. I was there as well, and I mean, I was like 5 or something, but I distracted them. I was being annoying and, well, what I'm trying to say is that the video was too personal. It wasn't just a scene. It was talking to me, thinking about it. The things I said towards the camera were pretty personal as well, even if they weren't as painful as what Lee had to witness. But Helen didn't see that when she watched the tape. And neither did I. That thing is somehow cursed. It's not real, I tried to argue. Or maybe it shows us the things that we forgot. Events that really happened. And Helen doesn't see it because she wasn't there. Lee replied. Okay, then how about we watch it now? Together. We'll know whether we are seeing the same things. Right. I suggested. I knew I had to watch this again, and doing it with Lee, who was an actor in the show like me, made this just a little easier to handle. We turned on Lee's TV and turned the volume low enough so we wouldn't wake up Helen, but loud enough so that we might be able to hear the made-up language. Lee suggested to film it with one of our phones so that we could try and unscramble the language somehow. Dun dun do do dun. The melody was really starting to duck me up. The next parts were exactly the same stuff Helen saw. This was exactly the scavenger hunt episode that Helen and I had seen. You know, maybe we did imagine things when we saw it. I don't know how, but... Stop! Helen shouted from the sofa. She was sitting up straight now, shaking and breathing heavily. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault, she muttered. Shit, it's fine. You're okay. Try to breathe. Slowly. I walked over to the sofa and took her hand. Her heart was beating like crazy. It was probably a nightmare. You're safe, Lee said and came closer as well. Helen furiously shook her head. It wasn't. I saw it. I saw him. Who? Both of us asked at the same time. After a moment, Helen's pulse became slower again and she slowly calmed down. I woke up when I heard the jingle. To be honest, I just wanted to see how you guys were reacting to the thing. 'Cause you saw different stuff when you watched it. She took a deep breath, but then it changed. It was different. You don't have to tell us if you don't want to. We get it, Lee said. It's okay. I was pretty drowsy, so at first I thought I was just imagining things. The children. Well, you were talking nonsense again, but then it changed. Dr. Worley invited a child inside. Lee and I shot each other a knowing look. We were both afraid of what Helen might say next. The boy looked like a patient we had. He was the first person I ever saw die. It broke my heart and my spirit back then. You have no idea how hard the job can be. It's not possible. Helen, you were just sleepy. Maybe you imagined something. Lee tried to comfort her. But the worst part was seeing you. Alex, you came really close to the camera. And then you told me it was all my fault. The next morning we made a plan. We looked up Larry's Wine and Dine and realized that it wasn't that far away from here. It was actually in one of the towns Helen and I passed on our way here. Martin. Martin. Ducking Martin. I exclaimed. Well, now we know for sure that it's a trap. Why else would they air it where we live? Martin isn't even in the same state, Helen said. And as if that wasn't strange enough already, Larry's had only opened about 2 weeks ago. Are you guys sure it's a good idea to go there? It's pretty damn obvious it's a trap, Lee said. We were already in my car, driving through the alleys surrounded by nothing but trees. I asked Helen if she wanted to go home after last night. I offered her to take my car and leave. I was honestly feeling terribly guilty to have sucked her into this madness, but after the initial shock wore off, she was even more determined to solve this mystery. I think that video made it personal for her. I had been too afraid to say these words out loud just yet, but there was something else that I started worrying about. Helen didn't just see a man in the video. It was someone who really died. Did that mean that the children Lee and I saw really died as well? Did we just forget? Hopefully we would find some answers at Larry's Wine and Dine. We weren't gonna go inside. It still felt like a trap, but driving there in the middle of the day, just to see what that place seemed safe enough. We parked far enough away so that whoever was in there wouldn't see us. It looks more like a diner though, doesn't it? The aesthetics don't really match Wine Dine, Helen said. And it's kinda old school. I can't really recognize any people inside though. It's too far away, I added. But check out the walls, Lee said. They were purple. A very familiar shade of purple. Guys, Helen whispered. Do you see that man behind us? I turned around and saw a man in his 40s sitting on a rusty bike. His face wasn't pointed towards us, but instead it looked as if he was staring inside the diner. He was wearing sunglasses and his hair was shorter, but I would recognize that face anywhere. It was Dr. Worley. Shit, did he see us? What do we do? Should I drive? I started panicking, but before I could actually start the engine, Lee had already opened his door and was rushing out. It all happened pretty fast. Helen and I shot each other a quick look before we followed Lee, who was now storming towards the man. Before any of us could react, he had punched Dr. Worley right in the face. Dr. Worley didn't hit back. He just held his bleeding nose and stared at us in shock. It's you, he mumbled. The kids. He kept switching his gaze between us and the diner, his face a mix of desperation and fear. Get out of here, now, he hissed. The door of the diner opened and a woman stepped outside. She must have spotted us because she shouted something inside the diner, but it was too far away for us to hear what she said. Something strange was going on. That much was clear, but I wasn't sure anymore who we needed to be afraid of. Guys, I think we should get the hell out of here, Helen said as she rushed towards the driver's seat of the car. I took another look at the diner where the commotion was getting bigger. I'm not sure if I would end up regretting this, but as I looked at the man with the bleeding nose, I knew that he would have some answers for us. Grab his arm. Lee, Worley is coming with us.